I forgot to change the thumbnail. Oops. There we go. There's our... hello, everyone. Like I said, like the title says, we can't have nice things on YouTube. I will edit this, and while we're doing that, I am going to be recording my reading on a little program known as Audacity. So I'm just gonna... boop. If Yuri were younger, he'd be over the moon at picking out a beautiful dress and dolling himself up to attend the ball, even if he had no interest in the church whatsoever. He would have gone just to see the awe on his mother's face and the happy tears she'd have shed at just catching a glimpse of the goddess. But this ball came too many years too late, and Yuri would rather step on hot coals than celebrate the goddess's rebirth. That is, until he meets one troublesome church member who gives his life a little bit of that fairy tale wonder. Chapter 1. The church is giving a ball. There we go. Yuri grunted as he sat down the rest of the... Nope. Oh, hey. Hello. As you can see, I'm doing a reading. And we just started. There we go. Yuri grunted as he sat down... Nope, not sat. There we go. Yuri grunted as he set down the last of the crates. He rubbed his lower back with a sigh of content. I can't thank you enough, sir. The red-haired merchant grinned, looking up from her lists. Who knows how long it would have taken if I did this by myself. It was a hell of a delivery. Yuri waved off her thanks. It was my pleasure. Besides, you're really doing Abyss a favor with this. Take the praise, my dear Yuri. A voice came from around the cart. Yuri did his best to hold in a groan. You toil and toil away without accepting even a look of gratitude, and I, for one, have had enough of it. As if he'd practiced, the purple-haired noble spun around the cart and practically draped himself over the side while shoving a red rose under Yuri's nose. My deepest gratitude, my dear Yuri. Nope, just his due. Oops. My deepest gratitude, Yuri. Nope. My deepest gratitude, dear Yuri. Yuri simply turned and began picking through the contents of the crates. They were filled to the brim with silks and drapery, each item a unique design, and no doubt way beyond anyone in Abyss's meager savings. Yuri sighed, his shoulders dropping. Lawrence, this is too much. Nonsense, Lawrence huffed, picking a random shirt with butterflies embroidered on it. These are all clothes that I could not sell to the nobles of high society, and I see no use in just tossing them to the wayside. Besides, there are people in Abyss who would love to partake in the rite this year, and I refuse to have them ridiculed. Lawrence's voice dropped, uncharacteristically sober. Nope. Lawrence's voice dropped, uncharacteristically somber. It is not their fault they cannot afford nice clothing. No, it certainly wasn't. Yuri knew that all too well. He knew that the people of Abyss would absolutely fawn over these new clothes, especially the ones who wanted to attend the ball later that month. Quite frankly, Yuri was in shock that Lawrence managed to save 10 crates stuffed with clothing that was one of a kind, hand-designed and made by the noble himself. There was no way all of the clothes donated were leftovers Lawrence couldn't sell. He'd never admit it, but Yuri knew that some gowns and robes were made specifically for Abyss and only Abyss. And only for Abyss. Anywho, Lawrence tossed the shirt back in the crate and sauntered into the Abyss Square. Hello, my Hello, my little inhabitants of Abyss. I, Lawrence Hellman... Okay, I'm gonna redo that line. Hello, my little inhabitants of Abyss. I, Lawrence Hellman Gloucester. I need to redo that. I, Lawrence Hellman Gloucester, come bearing gifts. If Yuri wanted to bury his face in his hands... Nope. Yuri wanted to bury his face in his hands as everyone who had the misfortune of hearing Lawrence's voice paused. Come, my friends, bask in the honor of the gratuitous donations by me, designed by me, and sewn by me. Yuri watched impassively as people flocked around the crates and the children's... I really need to remember to take breaths. Yuri watched impassively as people flocked around the crates, and children squealed that the fairy godmother had visited. As much as people hated nobles in Abyss, Lawrence was the exception, since he always treated the people with kindness and an open hand. Though, the first time Yuri met him, he almost ducked the noble in the face when he insulted the baker's flower-coated hair, which almost caused a riot, and Lawrence being moved... Which almost caused a riot, and Lawrence being which almost caused a riot, and Lawrence being mowed over by a horde of cats. Yuri was sure he stomped back home and complained to his parents about the Okay, redoing that. Yuri was sure he stomped back home and complained to his parents about the uncivil and barbaric people of Central Fodlan, bearing a legal battle Yuri was sure Abyss would lose. But he'd just come back the next month with another box of donations and an apology ballad. Sparkles outdid himself. Yuri felt a weight on his back settle as Happy climbed on a barrel. Sparkles outdid himself. Yuri felt a weight settle on his back as Happy climbed on a barrel and leaned on him, settling her chin on his head. He did, Yuri sighed. I don't know how I'll repay him. It's a donation, Yuri Bird. It's a donation, Yuri Bird. Happy yawned. I'm gonna redo that. It's a donation, Yuri Bird. Happy yawned. You're not supposed to. Yuri shook his head. It's too much work for a stupid ball. A stupid ball that will have free food. Think about it. A stupid ball that will have free food, Happy exclaimed. Think about it. The finest pastries in Fodlan. Melt in your mouth cream puffs and cakes and biscuits. Now what? I think Constance has corrupted you. She has, and I love it. Yuri rolled his eyes. So the only reason you're going... So the only reason you're going to the thing is for food? Yep. Happy waved a green dress in front of Yuri's eyes. Already picked one out. Points for efficiency, Yuri supposed. At least she and Constance would have fun, even if he had no interest in attending. It had been 20 years since the church threw open the gates and allowed the public to access during... I got a little quiet there. I'm sorry. Points for efficiency, Yuri supposed. At least she and Constance would have fun, even if he had no interest in attending. It had been 20 years since the church threw open the gates and allowed the public access during the goddess's rite of rebirth. Oops, sorry. They had been secretive about the rite. Invitations were hard to come by, much less an audience with the ruler of Fodwan herself. So hard, in fact, that Yuri had yet to hear of a single soul beyond the church whose So hard, in fact. That was a little too high-pitched. So hard, in fact, that Yuri had yet to hear of a single soul beyond the church who's even laid eyes on the goddess. Nope. So hard, in fact, that Yuri had yet to hear of a single soul beyond the church who's even laid in. So hard, in fact, that Yuri had yet to hear of a single soul beyond the church who's even laid eyes on the goddess. Rumors flew around from the rare times the goddess's carriage graced the streets. Some saying the goddess was a beautiful woman under the semi-transparent veil. Others swore up and down the goddess was male. No one knew anything about them, their age, what they even looked like, even their voice. It was all kept under lock and key. When the church made a Fodwan-wide announcement that the gates would be open all week during the rite... Nope. Scroll down a little further. When the church made a Fodwan-wide announcement that the gates would be open all week for the rite, and the goddess would be presented on the last day, nobles and peasants alike scrambled to procure the finest... Nobles and peasants alike scrambled to procure the best clothing and offerings they could manage. If Yuri were younger, he'd be over the moon at picking out a beautiful dress and dolling himself up to attend the ball, even if he had no interest in the church whatsoever. He would have gone just to see the awe in his mother's face and the happy tears He would have gone just to see the awe on his mother's face and the happy tears she'd have shed at just catching a glimpse of the goddess. Yuri swallowed hard, his fingers absent-mindedly twisting his mother's pearls in his pocket. "Hey, Yuri Bird?" "Hey, Yuri Bird." Happy poked at his head, snapping Yuri out of his downward spiral. She pointed to a cloaked figure trying, and failing, to look inconspicuous in the crowd of Abyssians poking through the crates. The person's face was obscured by the cloak, which looked much too nice to be owned by anyone in the slums. They seemed to keep a respectful distance from others, as best they could, anyway, peering into crates, occasionally reaching out and brushing their fingers over various patterns. Yuri squinted, catching a brief flash of gold on their wrist, a delicate bracelet with the crest of flames charm hanging off it. "Church scum," Happy muttered. I need to remember to breathe. "Church scum," Happy muttered. "Nothing good happens when they visit. We want to do something about it?" Yuri nodded, squaring his shoulders and stomping toward the church member. Normally, he'd watch and see what the situation was, but this was the second time in a week someone from the church came to Abyss. Quite frankly, Yuri was sick of it. Happy followed him with an equally menacing glare and a stomp in her step. Nope. Stretch. Happy followed him with an equally menacing glare and stomp in her step. The crowd parted, seeing Yuri, not even putting up a fuss when Yuri placed a hand on the church member's shoulder and forcibly spun them around. Yuri was met with a high collar that matched the color of the person's cloak, covering half their face. A large hood... The large hood casted a heavy shadow over the rest, only revealing... Gonna redo that sentence? A large hood casted a heavy The large hood casted a heavy shadow over the rest, only revealing wide, mint-green eyes. "It's you," they gasped. "What does that even mean?" Yuri hissed. "What are you doing here?" The church member stuttered. I don't. Last time someone like you came down here, the knights tore apart the merchant block falsely, claiming we kidnapped a guy." Yuri narrowed his eyes. "Tell me, what does the almighty goddess..." No. Tell me what the almighty goddess asked you to do this time. Did she tell you that some street rats raided a noble's closet? I don't like the delivery on that. Did she tell you that some street rat... Did she tell you that some street rats raided a noble's closet? Yuri stepped into the church member space. "Sorry to tell you, friend, but you won't find a single stolen item here." Ever heard of a The thing is about Happy is that, whatever. I'm recording this on Audacity. I don't want to... lose too much time. Ever heard of a donation? Yuri chimed in. Nope. Ever heard of a donation? Happy chimed in from behind Yuri. I'm sure the church gets plenty of them, but never considers doing the same to those below them. The church member brought their hands to their chest, fiddling with a long, oversized coat with holes cut halfway down the sleeves. Their eyes darted around as if... Their eyes started around as if this was the first time they'd been confronted. I'm sorry. The church member pushed Yuri aside with more force than he thought they'd have and fled through the crowd. Some people let out shocked exclaims, while others cursed at almost... Some people let out shocked exclaims, while others cursed at almost being knocked over. A few wide-eyed people looked at Yuri to see if they should do anything. That was weird, Happy deadpanned. Yuri couldn't help but agree. Have Balthus keep an eye on them, in case they are fleeing to gather up knights or something. Happy leveled him with a look. Really? You're going to give B a stealth mission? Like you're any better. Yuri rolled his eyes. Look, I'd do it myself, but I promised Ari I'd help him fix the leak in his ceiling. I also need to gather groceries for Jade and get started on sorting through library books. Scroll down. Look, I'd do it myself, but I promised Ari I'd help him fix the leak in his ceiling. I also need to gather groceries for Jade and get started sorting through the... I also need to gather groceries for Jade and get started sorting through the book library. I also need to gather groceries for Jade and get started sorting through the library books, then donate the ones they don't want to the kids. Not to mention there's been complaints about bandit attacks, which I need to look into, and I get it. Gonna redo that. I get it. Happy interrupted, holding back a sigh. Geez, I'm tired just hearing your schedule. She scratched the back of her head. Do you want any help? Nope. Do you want help? Yuri shook his head. I'll be fine. Besides, don't you and Constance have a date? It's not a date. It's a girls' afternoon out. So a date. Shut up, Yuri Bird. The moon and the low lantern lights. The moon and the low lantern light was the only thing illuminating the large scrap heap. turning Yuri's task from menial to overly frustrating. He knew there was something he could use to patch up the flower shop's squeaky door. For hell's sake, he saw it just yesterday. Yuri swore the rusty hinge was hiding from him on purpose. To add insult to injury, the church's clock tower chimed, alerting Yuri that it was much too late to be digging around trash bins. Don't want me to take you to Gramps for restoration, do you? Yuri huffed, tossing the hilt of a broken dagger over his shoulder. Too bad for you, but I'm a stubborn man, and I'm going to stay here for as long as I need until I find you. He dove into the scraps with the motivation of collapsing into bed. Boss! Yuri cursed, jolting upright and slamming his head on a discarded pot. I feel like I slowed that a little. Yuri cursed, jolting upright and slamming his head on a discarded pot. For hell's sake, Balthus! Don't scare me like that! Balthus scratched the back of his head. Sorry, man. The hell are you doing out so late? Oh. Well. Balthus moved aside, presenting the hooded person from before, standing sheepishly behind him. I caught the guy. Yuri noticed a rope tied around one of the person's wrists that was secured to Balthus's belt. Yuri groaned into his hands. I told you to watch the guy, not kidnap them. They wanted to come. Then why are they tied to your belt? They needed a chaperone? Yuri groaned again. He loved Balthus, but for hell's sake, the man needed a few extra brain cells. Not for the first time. He was glad the church wanted nothing to do with Abyss. If they'd seen one of their members tied to a guy 3 times his size, they'd raise Abyss to the ground. This church member was giving Yuri a migraine. Look, you. Yuri sighed, too tired to even put anger in his voice. I don't know what you want from me, but I don't have the energy to deal with the church right now. Or ever. Please just tell your goddess or archbishop or whatever that we are just trying to live our lives the best we can with what little we have, okay? The church member slowly approached with little sound. Bare feet with gold anklets peeked out from beneath the cloak as he carefully avoided any sharp scraps on the ground. They wordlessly held out a clumsily folded, dark piece of fabric. The coat they ran off with earlier. They watched as Yuri looked back and forth between the coat and the church member. I'm sorry I ran off with... That's all too soft. I'm sorry I ran off with it, they finally said, placing it gently next to Yuri's feet. Yuri studied the person as they fidgeted. He was surprised at just how small the person looked. He was surprised at just how small this person looked, even with all those layers. Whoops. That's the end of a sentence. He was surprised at just how small this person looked, even with all those layers. Judging from the tenor of their voice, this member was male, maybe around Yuri's age. Certainly looked the part, since the other man was barely taller than Yuri. Yuri had been worked up... Yuri had been too worked up earlier to notice. Well, thank you for having the insight to... Well, thank you for having the insight to at least return it. He turned back to his scrap collecting. He tried to focus on finding that elusive door hinge, but the church member's eyes, and Balthus's too, he supposed, kept boring into the back of his skull. Okay, do you still need something or what? Yuri snapped. I'm lost. Then have Balthus show you the way. Balthus chuckled nervously. Yeah, well, I was hoping you could do it. Yeah, well, I was hoping you could do it. I'm out later than I thought. Host is probably still waiting at the bar. Yuri groaned. He angrily scooped up the coat and cut the rope attaching the church member to Balthus with his dagger. You owe me, he hissed, glaring at the larger man. Balthus held up both his hands in surrender. You. Yuri watched the church member gingerly untie the rest of the rope. The gates to the church are that way. He pointed to the clock tower in the distance. Oh. The church member... Oh. The church member fidgeted. I came through a tunnel. Yuri wanted to knock this guy out and just leave him at the gates. Which one? The church member shrugged. It was... behind a lot of small buildings, I think. He shrunk at Yuri's unimpressed look. The one with the blue lanterns in front of it? And purple flowers? I'll help him. It was behind his and Balthus's goddamn house. I'm gonna seal that stupid tunnel. No. I'm going to seal that stupid tunnel when I get the chance. Nope. Not quite. I'm gonna seal that stupid tunnel when I have the chance, Yuri growled. He grabbed the church member's sleeves. Nope. He grabbed the church member's sleeve, ignoring the way he jolted at the sudden touch. Yuri walked with a Yuri walked with a purpose, ready to ditch and be done with this troublesome day as soon as possible. He ignored the soft taps of the church member behind him, clearly struggling to keep up with his long strides. He wasn't expecting a sharp pull from his arm as the church member face-planted on the uneven cobblestone, bringing Yuri down with him. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean... I won't do it again. I promise. The church member's small, breathless apologies twisted Yuri's heart. No, it's my fault. Yuri sighed, running his hand through his hair. His stomach dropped, seeing the scratches on the bare toes peeking out from under the church member's cloak. I didn't take into account that you aren't wearing shoes. He stood up and gingerly held out his hand. I'll walk slower, okay? The church member nodded and tugged his sleeve over his hand before grasping Yuri's. Don't want to touch a street urchin? Don't want to touch a street urchin, Yuri quipped as they began walking again. I feel like I slowed that again Okay. Don't want to touch a street urchin, Yuri quipped as they began walking again, sounding harsher than he intended. The church member shook his head. No. Oops. The church member shook his head. It's not that. You a germaphobe or something? No. Yuri shrugged, deciding that conversation was too much work for what it was worth. They walked the rest of the way in awkward silence, neither party daring to say something to the other. When they arrived at the crumbling hole in the wall, Yuri almost cried looking at because he realized the materials for patchwork was too over budget. He dropped the church member's hand and gestured to it as if to say, "Here we are." Thank you, the church member. Thank you, the member mumbled. I'm sorry again for all the trouble I caused. He shuffled around Yuri and bowed before he turned to the wall. He shuffled around Yuri and bowed before he turned toward the tunnel. Hey, Yuri called out. The church member paused, and glanced over his shoulder. "Next time," Yuri said with a sigh, "don't wear so many layers, and put some shoes on." The church member nodded and silently disappeared back into the tunnel. Yuri sighed, letting his shoulders drop and leaning heavily against the stone wall. He needed a drink. And sleep. Probably both. Seeing as he was already home, Yuri pushed his way into his bedroom and collapsed onto the dirty, second-hand sheets. The whole day replayed in his mind, starting with the headache that was Lauren's to the full-on migraine that was that mysterious church member. Yuri didn't care much for him, but he'd hope he'd at least take his advice and wear shoes instead of injuring his toes all the time. Yuri bolted up. "For the love of anything, please tell me I don't told..." Yuri bolted up. "For the love of anything, please don't tell me I told him next time." When Balthus arrived home, he listened to Yuri screaming and groaning into his pillow the rest of the night. Whew. Well, I'm sorry I wanted to go longer, but I don't know if you can tell, but my voice is already tired, so I'm gonna pause it here. Thanks so much for listening. I will do the second chapter soon. Bye!